the offense looked as good as it had been all season. Alabama puts up 109 points and really played great defense. If you really just looked at the scoreboard or looked at the box score after the game, you might have thought that Alabama did not play well on defense. Alabama was up 31 with a little under 8 to go, and Nate Oates started pulling starters, resting Sears and Estrada, as much as he could. Ended up putting in walk-ons just under 4 minutes. So, there was some not great defense that was played at the very, very end of that game. But by and large, the effort on defense and how Alabama played in that game was not indicative of the final score. They dominated the game start to finish. And it, again, looked like the Alabama offense that we know and love, right? That was the offense that now has broken the SEC record for 100-point scoring games. They were tied with 95-96 Kentucky. End up breaking that record to now have 10 100-point scoring games this season. So just an elite offense, and it was great to see. Oates had talked about we had been short-staffed without Reitzel and then Griffin, and he attributed a lot of the offensive woes to that. And you saw what happened when Alabama had a full roster. The only player that was out was Davin Cosby. He has a fracture in his foot, so he's not going to be playing. But all of your main starters, all of your main rotation guys were available, were playing, and played great minutes, and were elite. So Alabama scores 109 points and really looks incredible doing it. Got the stats here in front of me. They put up a 1.31 points per possession. If you're not familiar, good is anything over 1.0. Elite is anything over 1.2. Phenomenal is anything above that, right? So 1.31 is absolutely incredible. Alabama shoots 62% from 2, 56% from 3. Not a great shooting night from the line. Only going 64%, 24-37. And honestly, the one spot that Alabama did not do really well in that game was rebound. And so we knew going into the second game against Grand Canyon, rebounding would be a huge sticking point for the team, as Alabama ends up losing the offensive rebound battle to Charleston 17-6, right? That's not something you want to see. Alabama had been doing well on the glass. They had a few games where they struggled, like the A&M game, they struggled on the glass, even though they won by 25. Alabama had some issues in offensive rebounding a little bit against Florida. But Alabama had played some of the best offensive rebounding teams in the country. And so, you felt like Nate Oates would be able to clean that up going into the next game. And that would not continue. And, as we'll talk about here very shortly, that was absolutely correct. But the big thing is that the game, like I said, the game went exactly how we hoped. You had a big game out of Latrell Reitzel. He goes for 17 points, 5 of 6 from 3. Estrada gets 13, 8, and 7. Didn't shoot super efficiently, 5 of 10 from 2, 1 of 4 from 3, but, didn't need to. And then Mark Sears was Mark Sears. 6 of 7 from 2, 3 of 6 from 3, 9 of 11 from the line, 5 assists, 30 points, ho-hum, 30-point game for Mark Sears, and just looked awesome. So at the end of the day, that's what you really need to know about the Charleston game. Charleston game was all about offense. You knew that was going to be a fast-paced game. If you paid attention to my last podcast that I put out talking about kind of the differences in each team, Charleston was exactly what I hoped it would be. It was a way for Alabama's offense to get back on track. It was a way for Alabama to get out and run in transition, and that if the defense played as well as I had thought, it could really run away. And it was exactly that, right? The 13-point margin does not say how big of a blowout this game really was. As I mentioned, 31 points, 8 minutes to go. Alabama really led start to finish. At the very beginning, there was a little bit of, struggles where it was like, is Charleston going to make this a game? And then Alabama flipped a switch, turned it on, and absolutely ran away with the game. So it was really, really awesome to see that. Charleston has some guys. They ended up making shots down the stretch, but nothing to worry about really going into game 2. So following that Alabama game, we see St. Mary's play Grand Canyon, and it was exactly like we thought it was going to be. St. Mary's is one of the slowest teams in the country. They slowed down Grand Canyon, and Grand Canyon ends up winning a rock fight against St. Mary's. And it sets up the Alabama Grand Canyon game. So going into the Grand Canyon game, I did not do a podcast, but I did go ahead and put out my thread as always. I will be putting out a thread before this North Carolina game. I plan on writing it on the plane ride tomorrow. But the thing that I immediately noticed on the game was Grand Canyon was a team that allowed the pace to be dictated and the tempo to be dictated by the opposing team. They were obviously, it was talked about endlessly that it was going to be a very difficult scout going from St. Mary's, one of the slowest teams in America, to Alabama, one of the fastest teams in America. But if nothing else, Grand Canyon had a senior, 24 years old, that was a draft prospect in Tyron Grant Foster. And if there was something that about in March, guys win in March. And, having a guy to go to is as good as you can get, right? And having a guy that's a draft-eligible guy at Grand Canyon, that's something to really think about. So he was kind of the focal point of what you assumed for Grand Canyon coming into this game. And that's what happened. Tyron Grant Foster ends up with 29 points. Nobody else at Grand Canyon scores more than 8. They do have 3 guys with 8 points. He's the only guy on the team to hit a 3. They go 2 for 20 as a team. But Alabama does not have a very efficient night either. Alabama, ends up putting a 1.01 on the board from an offensive perspective. Compared to how we had been doing earlier in the year, again, that 1.01 is not bad, but 1.01 for Alabama standards is some of the worst that they've played all year, honestly. But Alabama's defense holds Grand Canyon to a 0.86. 0.86 is one of the lowest outputs our defense has allowed a team to in the entire season. Part of that was because Grand Canyon, if you watch any of the national media, Grand Canyon didn't run as many sets. Grand Canyon really didn't have a great offensive scheme. Part of that to do with the fact that they followed up St. Mary's with Alabama. Part of that to do with Alabama's ability to defend and stop guys off the dribble. I thought Alabama's defense in this game was flying around, did a really good job. Alabama ends up with 10 steals, 9 blocks. This was a super gritty, tough defensive game. Because even though Alabama wins this game and wins it by 11, Grand Canyon has 10 steals. Grand Canyon has 8 blocks, right? This was a game that was a rock fight from the word go. And there's 2 main storylines that you have to take away from this game before you talk about anything else. Number 1, Mo Diabate won this game. There's no other way to state it. If you saw any of the post-game press conferences, any of the videos in the locker room where the players were, talked to by some of the media, all the players were asked about Mo Diabate, and they all said it very plainly. We do not win this game without Mo Diabate. Alabama puts in Mo. Jaron Stevenson fouls out. Alabama is down 1 late in this game. And Alabama puts in Mo Diabate, who immediately scores 8 of the next 9 points, hits some big free throws. He ends up going 3 of 3 from the line. And for anyone that's not aware, Mo Diabate is one of the worst free throw shooters on the team. So hits 3 big free throws down the stretch, gets 5 offensive rebounds, 2 blocks. And this was in just 9 minutes of action, right? Nate puts him in at the very end of this game, and in 12 minutes of action, Diabate gets 9 points, 8 of them right there at that very end of the game, hits big free throws, gets blocks, gets offensive rebounds, and quite frankly, wills this team to a victory. It was something that was super noticeable because, for anybody that's watched this team all year, you've seen a lot of that out of Mo for a large piece of this year. Against Tennessee, Alabama was using Mo. Ryland would be on Dalton Connect, and then when Ryland would come out, you would put in somebody like Mo. He often would draw the hardest defensive assignment of the year. Alabama's trying to use him much in a way that, Nate used Herb. Obviously, much different player, but similar. So that's really what you saw out of Mo this year. And oftentimes, Nate does not put in Mo quite as often because he is not as good of an offensive option as Jaren or Sam. Simply put, right? Jaren and Sam are much more efficient on the offensive end. However, it's very clear that Mo is hard-nosed and is the best rebounder of the bunch and is probably the best defender of the bunch as well. And so with that being said, Nate puts in Mo. Mo goes on this tear and wills the team to a victory. And it completely turned the complexion of the game. It completely energized the team. It was we need to be fighting as hard as he is. A free throw gets missed. He immediately gets the offensive rebound, gets a putback and one. Just fighting for every rebound, for every ball. Like Mo wins this game for Alabama. The other thing that you have to talk about, if you're going to talk about this game, is Latrell Wrightsell went out. There's some question as to whether this is a one game going out or whether this is a potential season going out. He goes down in the first half. There's a 3-point shot taken. It looks like an elbow maybe clips him in the head. It doesn't seem like a super strong, hard hit. But then when he falls, there's a sudden bounce, and you can see him wince on his face, and clearly something is off. The reason this is really important is Latrell Wrightsell obviously was out with a head injury earlier this season, and from all accounts has had multiple concussions over the course of his career. And so I don't know if it was fully precautionary. There's been some mixed data on how what to the extent of what has happened. Nate Oates immediately says following the game, hey, Latrell's going to be with us. But then during the week, we've started to hear, hey, he's going to be meeting with doctors. We're going to have to assume we're going to be playing without him. Whether he's going to play is uncertain. So whether or not Latrell Wrightsell plays in this next game is really up in the air. If I was to be asked to put a line on it, I would say more than likely he's not going to be playing in this game. That's just my opinion. I do not have it on any good authority that is the case. But, given how he walked off, given, he was in his sweatsuit, giving players hugs as they went into the locker room and dapping guys up for half, I really think that there is a chance that Latrell does not play in the Sweet 16 game. And by and large, if he does not play in the Sweet 16 game, I would assume he probably also would not play in an Elite Eight game. That is just my assumption. I could be wrong. I could absolutely be wrong. That is just what my gut instinct is telling me at this time. If he plays, absolutely awesome. Obviously, if he doesn't, that is a hurt. He is one of Alabama's best three-point shooters. He is a ball handler. He stretches the floor against a good North Carolina team. And at the end of the day, you're in the Sweet 16, so every team you're about to play is going to be very, very good. It would be great to have him. But you don't. You have played some big games without him in the past. You have won some big games without him in the past. You beat Florida in Coleman Coliseum without him. You were very close to beating Tennessee in Coleman Coliseum without him. You have the ability to win some games. So, if you don't have him, then you play without him and you game plan as best you can and you play with the guys that you have available. So that is something just to kind of watch for this next game. Don't want to go too crazy on it, but just wanted to give everyone a heads up as to what happened in the game and, the big key takeaways for that Grand Canyon game. The super big takeaways are the defense looked awesome. Tyron Grant Foster got his points. Again, this kid's elite. He's going to go in the NBA draft. That surprised no one that paid attention to him over the course of the season. Him doing that well and, scoring that many points on the big stage, yeah, that's who he is. So that did not shock me in the slightest. Alabama, again, puts out one of their best defensive outputs of the season and is on to the Sweet 16. Last thing I want to mention on that, there was a stat that came out where